It started with the rain. That kind of mountain rain that doesn't fall so much as it crawls, sliding down the trees and dripping from the power lines like the sky's bleeding slow. I was driving alone, somewhere between Boone and the Tennessee border, the road coiling through the Appalachians like a wet black snake. My wipers struggled to keep up, thudding against the glass in an offbeat rhythm, the sound filling the cab with a kind of nervous heartbeat. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. My brother had asked me to haul an old chest from our late father's cabin before the bank claimed it. Said he couldn't make the trip. Too many memories, too many ghosts, or something like that. I told him I didn't believe in ghosts, at least I didn't then. The truck was an old Ford F-100, the same one Dad used to drive to town on Saturdays. It smelled like pine, wet leather, and that faint metallic tang of old rust that seems to seep right into your tongue. The heater didn't work right, so I had the windows cracked just enough to keep the glass from fogging. Outside, the forest leaned in close, black branches against the dim yellow wash of the headlights. The road signs had long stopped showing towns or numbers, just curves ahead and watch for falling rock. I kept the radio off. Out here, it never picked up more than static, and I'd had enough company from my own thoughts. But somewhere near the county line, just as the rain hit its hardest, the radio clicked on by itself. No music, no voices at first, just that low hiss like someone breathing close to the speaker. I thought maybe I'd bumped the knob with my hand. I turned it off again. Not a minute later, it turned itself back on. This time, buried in the static, I heard something, faint, drawn out. It wasn't music, it was a voice. It said my name. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The rain, the late hour, the hum of the tires. It does strange things to your brain. But then, it said it again. Clearer this time. A whisper that somehow cut through the static like it was meant for me alone. Eli. I froze, hands locked on the steering wheel. The truck swerved slightly before I corrected it. I told myself it was just a broadcast glitch, maybe a stray signal bouncing off the mountains. I'd heard stories, old miners picking up foreign stations on their ham radios, voices that traveled on strange frequencies when the air was thick. But that didn't explain how it knew my name. The voice came again, softer this time, like someone was leaning in from the passenger seat. Eli, keep driving. Every word matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. My mouth went dry. I reached out and turned the radio dial, spinning it from one dead channel to another. The static shifted, but the whisper followed, cutting in between bands. No matter where I tuned, it was there. Rain's heavy tonight, it said, and I swear the tone almost smiled. You should keep your eyes on the road. I looked around the cab. The windows were fogging again, the air thick and cold. Something about that voice. It wasn't threatening exactly, but it wasn't right either. It felt aware, like it could see me through the glass. I reached over and shut the radio off, pulled the knob clean out of the dash just to be sure. The voice stopped, the static stopped, only the rain remained. Then I heard it again, but not from the radio. It came from the air vents, a low, breathy whisper curling through the sound of the blower fan. Don't turn around, it said. My whole body went rigid. The road ahead narrowed into a tunnel of trees, my headlights stretching out into a thin cone of white. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound of my pulse filled the cab, and underneath it, I could hear the whisper threading through the static hum of the rain. There's something with you. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles pale in the dashboard light. My first thought was that someone had climbed into the bed of the truck when I stopped for gas an hour earlier. Some drifter maybe, trying to scare me or worse. But the voice, it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the truck. I looked into the rearview mirror. The reflection showed only the dark outline of the bench seat, wet glass behind it, and faint shapes of the forest beyond. Nothing moved, but still, I felt it. That prickle in the back of the neck when you know someone's watching. The voice came again. You don't believe in signs, do you, Eli? It sounded different now, lower, familiar, and then I realized why. It was my father's voice. I almost slammed on the brakes. My father had been dead for 6 years. I stared at the mirror again, heart hammering, the memory of his last words flickering somewhere deep in my head. He died in that same cabin I was driving toward, chest crushed beneath a fallen beam during a storm, not much different from this one. I hadn't been there. My brother said Dad was shouting something before the roof gave way, something he couldn't make out through the wind. "Go back," the voice said now, softer, almost pleading. "Go back home, son." I swallowed hard, throat tight. I wanted to pull over, to throw open the door and run into the trees, anything to get away from that sound. But the rain was coming down in sheets now, and I couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The mountain roads twisted like ribbons, one wrong turn and I'd end up in a ravine. "I can't," I whispered back before I even realized I was speaking. "I have to get there. I have to finish this." For a moment there was silence. Then, in that same calm, fatherly tone, it said, "Then you won't make it." The engine sputtered once, twice, then died. The headlights flickered out, plunging everything into black. The only sound was the drumming of rain on the roof and the faint hiss of the vents. I sat there in the dark, every muscle locked. The air felt colder now, heavy with that wet smell of pine and mud. I reached for the ignition, but the key refused to turn. When I looked down, my hands were trembling. Something moved behind me. It wasn't loud, just the faintest sound of fabric shifting, like someone settling in the back seat. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My breath fogged the glass in front of me, and in that fog, I saw a faint handprint appear on the inside of the windshield, small, wet, like someone had pressed it there from behind me. My stomach turned. I forced myself to look into the rearview mirror. There was a shadow sitting in the back seat. No face, no features, just a darker patch of darkness. But the shape was there. Shoulders, head, and the slow rise and fall of breathing. I don't remember deciding to move, but my body acted on its own. I shoved the door open, stumbled out into the rain, and fell hard into the mud. My boots slipped as I ran toward the tree line, the flashlight in my jacket pocket bouncing against my chest. I didn't look back until I hit the edge of the woods. The truck's headlights had flickered back on. Only now they weren't white. They were a dull, sickly yellow, like the bulbs were filled with smoke. And through the rain, I saw it. My own reflection sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring forward. I don't remember much after that. When I came to, the rain had stopped. Dawn was bleeding into the fog. My truck sat 10 yards from where I'd left it, engine running smooth as ever. The radio was silent. I climbed back in, shaking, the seat cold beneath me. The mirror showed only me this time, mud-smeared, eyes hollow. I drove straight home. A week later, I sold the truck to a junkyard in Asheville. Didn't even ask for money. Just told the man to take it off my hands. He laughed, said it was a fine piece of machinery, easy to fix up. I told him it wasn't the kind of thing you fix. 2 months after that, I got a call. The man from the junkyard said the truck wouldn't start no matter what they tried. He said the radio kept coming on by itself, and that one night, while he was working late, it said his name. He laughed when he told me that part. Said maybe the thing was haunted. I told him to scrap it, but he didn't listen. Last I heard, he drove it out past the Blue Ridge. Said it finally ran fine. That was 3 years ago. A few weeks back, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Just static, and underneath it, faint but clear enough, a voice I hadn't heard in years. It said my name, and then it whispered, "I told you not to turn around." When I first moved into that apartment above the laundromat, I thought I'd found a steal. The building sat at the edge of a dying mountain town, 2 streets, 1 bar, and a post office that hadn't updated its hours since the 80s. The laundromat downstairs hadn't run in years, but the owner had rented out the old office space upstairs for cheap. Said it had character, which I would learn later, was the kindest way of saying nobody else would stay long enough to fix it up. The steps to my place were warped and uneven, the kind that creak no matter how light you walk. My unit had a slanted ceiling, a tiny window facing the street, and walls painted the color of tobacco smoke. But I didn't mind. I'd been between jobs for months trying to scrape something together after my last gig fell through in Boone. Rent was dirt cheap, and the landlord, An older guy named Mr. Gaines lived a few doors down. He gave me the key, wished me luck, and told me not to worry about the noise at night. That first night, I thought he meant the wind. The mountains get loud after dark. The air hums through the trees, loose shingles chatter, and you can almost hear the town breathing under the fog. But it wasn't the wind that woke me around 2 in the morning. It was footsteps. Slow, careful, pacing right above me. I sat up in bed, listening. The ceiling was low enough that I could almost reach up and touch it. I figured maybe it was raccoons or a stray cat. Old buildings get all kinds of tenants. But the steps were too heavy, too measured. Heel first, then the soft drag of toes. Human. My brain tried to reason it out. Maybe there was a crawl space above the ceiling, something I hadn't noticed when I moved in. But the sound, it wasn't above the hall or kitchen. It was right above my bed. I got up, grabbed the broom, and tapped the ceiling a few times. The footsteps stopped immediately. The silence that followed felt too sudden, too alive, like the air was holding its breath. I told myself it was nothing and went back to bed, but I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I mentioned it to Mr. Gaines when I passed him by the mailbox. He just nodded, eyes low. "Old building," he said. "It talks sometimes. You'll get used to it." There was something in his tone, something rehearsed, like he'd said that same line too many times before. The nights that followed settled into a pattern. It always started around 1:30. A single creak, then another, then the slow pacing overhead. Sometimes it moved toward the far wall, other times it lingered right over where I slept. The sound wasn't loud, but it traveled, like someone walking barefoot on old boards just inches from my head. By the third night, I tried music, headphones, even left the bathroom light on. Didn't matter. The steps always came back, steady and patient, until I couldn't tell if I was hearing them or just waiting for them. One night, I pushed my mattress into the corner of the room, far from where the ceiling dipped lowest. I figured maybe it was a trick of acoustics, that the sound carried differently through the wood. I stayed up late, sketching by lamplight, forcing my eyes to stay open. At 1:42, the footsteps started again, only this time they didn't move. They stood still, right above where my bed used to be. A soft sprinkle of plaster dust fell from the ceiling, catching in the lamplight. My breath caught in my throat. Then the steps resumed, but now they followed the mattress, tracing the path I'd dragged it across the floor. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By dawn, I packed my things, ready to leave. But when I opened the door, the stairwell was blocked off with a chain and a plywood sign. "Do not enter. Repairs in progress." I hadn't heard a single hammer or saw in days. No one had come by. When Mr. Gaines finally answered my knock, he looked like he hadn't slept either. "Chains just to keep folks out of the laundromat," he said. "Insurance thing. You're fine up there." I told him about the footsteps, about the dust, about how it followed me across the room. He looked past me, toward the window. "Ain't no one up there, son. Roof's solid." "You're hearing things." I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. But that night, the rain started, hard, cold, relentless, and the footsteps came earlier. 12:17 this time. Louder, closer. The rain on the roof couldn't drown it out. I tried to ignore it, pulled the blanket over my head, but the boards above began to bend, groaning under invisible weight. I could hear breathing now. Slow. Wet. And then, 3 knocks on the ceiling, right above my face. Not footsteps. Knocks. Something in me broke. I bolted from bed, grabbed my coat, and ran for the stairs. The chain was still there, but I kicked it loose and stumbled down into the dark laundromat below. The air was thick with mildew and detergent that had long gone sour. My flashlight cut through layers of dust, catching on the rusted machines, the peeling paint, the warped linoleum. That's when I noticed it. One of the ceiling tiles sagging near the back corner. Something dark had seeped through, staining it in uneven circles. I reached up and poked it with the broom handle. The tile gave way, collapsing in a puff of dust and ash. Something fell out. It wasn't a body. At least not anymore. Just fragments, charred fabric, a shoe half melted to bone, and a small metal bracelet blackened by soot. The air smelled like old smoke and something sweeter underneath, like burnt sugar. I dropped the broom and backed away, heart pounding. My flashlight caught the far wall, and that's when I saw the outline. Faint handprints smeared across the plaster. Small, child-sized, leading up toward the ceiling. That was enough for me. I left everything behind and drove through the night until I hit Asheville by morning. Didn't even stop for gas until I was 2 counties away. A week later, curiosity got the better of me. I called a friend who worked at the courthouse, asked if he could look up anything about a fire at that address. He called back a few hours later, voice uneasy, said there'd been a laundromat fire there in '94. Started upstairs, they thought. Killed a woman and her daughter. No one ever rebuilt. He asked me why I wanted to know. I told him I'd just been renting there. He went quiet for a moment. Renting where? He asked. Upstairs, I said. Another pause. Eli, that building's been condemned since '96. There is no upstairs apartment. I hung up without answering. Drove back a few days later, needing to see it for myself. The building was there, all right, boarded up, roof half collapsed, windows broken. I parked across the street and stared up at where my window had been. That's when I saw it. Through the gaps in the boards, faint against the gray sky, a small hand pressed against the inside of the glass. And from somewhere deep in the empty building, through walls and years and ash, I heard it again. Those same slow, patient footsteps. Only this time they weren't above me. They were coming down. I took the night shift at the old construction yard because no one else wanted it. It sat just outside of town, past a stretch of overgrown road where the fog never seemed to lift. They were supposed to be building a new housing development there, but the company had gone under halfway through. What was left were half-poured foundations, stacks of rebar, and a trailer that served as my guard shack. My only company was a half-dead coffee pot, a space heater that smelled like burning dust, and a bank of flickering monitors showing camera feeds from the lot. Most nights were quiet. I'd make my rounds every hour, check the gates, and kill time by listening to the hum of the generator behind the shack. The only strange thing about the place was the floodlights. They were motion sensor, but for months they'd been acting up. Some nights they'd flicker on for no reason at all. Other times I'd find them on when I came in, even though no one had touched the system. At first I didn't think much of it. Just faulty wiring, I told myself. The lights were old, the whole site half abandoned. But then I started noticing a pattern. The same floodlight every time, the one near the gravel pit at the far end of the property. It always came on around the same hour, between 12:15 and 12:30. The first night it happened, I was halfway through my thermos of coffee when the monitor lit up. I leaned forward, watching the grainy black and white feed. The light had snapped on, bright as a flare, washing the whole pit in pale white. And under that light, at the very edge of the frame, was a figure. He was standing dead still, facing the camera. I thought it might be a trespasser, a drifter maybe, or some kid screwing around. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, headed out through the drizzle. By the time I got there, the light was still on, but the figure was gone. Just muddy tracks in the gravel leading from the floodlight toward the fence. They stopped halfway, like the person had vanished into thin air. I checked the cameras when I got back, expecting to see him leave. But the feed cut to static the moment I stepped outside and stayed that way for 2 full minutes. When it came back, the light was still on, and the pit was empty. The next night, same time, the light came on again. This time, I didn't leave the shack. I watched the monitor, waiting. And there he was again, tall, thin, standing under the floodlight. I couldn't make out his face, it was just shadow. No movement, no sound, just standing. I told myself I was tired, that maybe I was seeing things. But something about the way he stood, so still, so deliberate, felt wrong. Not like a person caught by accident, but like someone who wanted to be seen. When I mentioned it to the other guards during shift change, they laughed. Said it was probably a reflection or a bad camera feed. "You've been up too long, man," one of them told me. "You'll start seeing all kinds of things out there," but I wasn't imagining it. 3 nights later, I found footprints by the floodlight again, bare feet, pressed deep into the mud. Not boots, not shoes, just long, narrow feet, each print spaced too far apart for normal steps. They led from the light straight toward the shack where I slept. That night, I locked the door for the first time. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, maybe someone playing a prank. But the next morning, when I stepped outside, I saw something new, the shape of a hand, pressed into the fogged window beside my bed. Long fingers, too long. That was when I started leaving the floodlight on. It felt stupid, but I figured if I could see him, maybe he couldn't sneak up. Every night I'd sit by the window, watching the yard glow pale white through the fog. Hours would pass, nothing but rain and the soft crackle of the generator. But sooner or later I'd see him, always in the same place, standing under the light, not moving, just watching. I thought about calling the sheriff, but what would I even say? That some shadow was standing in the yard. They'd have told me to sleep more, lay off the coffee. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I left the window open a crack, just enough to hear the wind. The forest around the site was thick with pine, so the air carried that wet, sharp smell. Everything was silent until the generator hiccuped. The floodlight flickered, and I heard it, a sound like nails dragging slowly through gravel. I turned off the heater to listen. It came again, closer this time, that slow scraping drag. I moved to the window and looked out. The light flickered once more, then steadied, and there he was. Standing directly beneath it, head tilted back, face pointed toward me. I froze. For the first time, I could see that his clothes weren't right. They looked wrong somehow. Stiff, dark, but not from color. More like they'd been wet for too long and dried that way, clinging to the frame beneath. His head moved slightly, like he was adjusting to the light. I backed away from the window and grabbed the radio. "Base, you copy?" I whispered. Static. "Base, this is Site 4. I've got someone in the yard." No answer. The scraping stopped. When I looked again, he was gone. The next morning, I told Mr. Gaines, the supervisor, that I was done. He said the camera showed nothing. No movement, no light flickering, no one standing under the lamp. I offered to show him the footprints, but the rain had washed them away. He asked if I'd been drinking on shift. I hadn't. I came back one more night just to collect my things. I told myself I wouldn't stay past midnight. But when the clock hit 12:14, I felt that same pull, that same weight in the air. I went to the window and looked out. The floodlight was already on, and this time, he wasn't standing in the pit. He was standing at the edge of the shack, almost close enough to touch the wall. His head tilted up, looking directly at me through the glass. I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. His face was still hidden, just a void beneath the brim of some kind of hood or shadow. But the longer I stared, the more I realized something about the way his neck bent wasn't right. Too sharp, too long. Then the power went out. Everything went black. The generator choked and died. The silence that followed felt alive. I fumbled for my flashlight, heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I flicked it on, pointed it toward the window. Nothing. When I opened the door, the air hit me, wet, heavy, still. I shined the light toward the floodlight pole. It was dark now, the bulb cracked, hanging loose by a wire. And right below it, the ground was torn open. At first, I thought it was a hole. But when I knelt closer, I saw claw marks in the mud. Deep gouges, like something had been trying to dig its way out. The smell hit me next. Earth, rot, something old. The kind of smell that clings to your throat. I backed away slowly, the beam of my flashlight trembling. The ground beneath my boots felt soft, unsteady, like the whole yard was hollow underneath. I don't remember leaving. I just remember the next morning, sitting in my truck, engine running, sun barely up. My uniform was muddy. My flashlight was gone. They found the shack's door open when the day crew arrived. They said it looked like someone had been digging. The company shut down the site after that, called it structural instability. A few months later, the land got sold off to a different developer. They bulldozed the site, filled in the pit, poured new foundations. I didn't think about it again until last winter, when I passed through town and saw the new home standing where the yard used to be. At night, the floodlights still come on sometimes, randomly, even when no one's outside. I stopped by one of the houses once, just parked across the road and watched. Around midnight, the lights flickered on, and there he was again, standing under the glow, exactly where the pit used to be. Only now, he wasn't looking up at a window. He was facing the street, facing me. It started the second week after I moved into the farmhouse. I'd bought the place cheap, too cheap, if I'm honest. After it sat empty for years up in that fog-soaked hollow between Carter Ridge and Little Stony Creek. The realtor said it just needed a little love. What it really needed was company. The kind that stays up at night and listens to the wind crawl under the doors. The first few nights it rained like the mountains were trying to drown the valley. The bathroom, with its old iron tub and clawed feet, became a place I avoided. The drain in the middle of the floor would gurgle when the rain hit the roof, a deep, hollow sound that echoed through the pipes like someone knocking from below. At first, I thought it was pressure, just air caught somewhere in the plumbing. But one evening, while brushing my teeth, I heard it again. Only this time, it wasn't a gurgle. It was a word. My name, soft, wet, whispered through the metal like steam escaping. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth, staring at the drain. The whisper came again, drawn out and deliberate. Eli. I backed out of the bathroom and shut the door, telling myself it was the wind. The wind doesn't know your name, though. Over the next few nights, I started hearing more. Not every time, it came and went. But when the rain fell hard enough, the voice would return. Sometimes it was a low moan. Sometimes it almost sounded like crying. Then came words. Full sentences, faint but clear, rising and fading with the flow of water. It talked about things I shouldn't have known, things I had done. My father's rifle hidden under the truck seat. The lie I told my sister about why I missed Mom's funeral. Every secret I ever buried seemed to crawl up through those pipes like they'd been waiting for the chance to breathe again. I tried to record it once. Sat in the bathroom with my phone propped beside the drain, waiting for the sound. The house stayed quiet as a tomb. The second I stopped recording, the voice came back, low laughter, bubbling like it was choking on water. I threw the phone into the hallway and didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called my neighbor, old man Givens. He'd lived in that hollow longer than anyone. When I told him about the voice, he didn't laugh. Just got quiet. Said the place used to belong to a man named Arthur Hensley who'd gone missing back in the 80s. Folks said he fell into the septic pit behind the barn one winter night after drinking too much. They never found his body, just his hat floating in the slush. The pit had been filled and sealed years ago. But Givens said sometimes when it rained, you could hear him calling through the pipes, asking to be let out. That evening, I walked out behind the barn. The ground there was soft, moss growing thick over the sealed slab. The rain had picked up again, drumming steady against the tin roof. I swear I could hear it, the same muffled voice, deep beneath the soil, a wet, rasping echo that carried through the drain in my memory. I backed away fast, boots slipping in the mud, and didn't stop until I was back inside with every door locked. That night, I unplugged the bathroom sink, unscrewed the drain cover, and jammed it tight with rags. I did the same to the tub, even taped over the vent fan. I wanted silence. I wanted the rain to mean nothing again. But silence doesn't come easy in those hills. Around midnight, the faucet started dripping in the kitchen. I went down barefoot, shivering, still half asleep. The faucet turned itself on, water running steady. I reached to shut it off, and that's when I heard it again. Eli. It wasn't from the drain this time. It was rising through the faucet, soft and warped, like a voice pushed through the throat of a dying thing. You hear me, it said. You left me there. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The water splashed, and for just a second, I thought I saw something move inside the sink, just beneath the surface, like a hand pressing up from underneath the metal. I ran out the front door and didn't stop until I hit the edge of the gravel road. Rain poured down, soaking me through. I looked back at the farmhouse, every window dark except for the kitchen, where the faucet still ran. The drain pipes groaned like someone crawling through them, slow and steady. I didn't go back inside until sunrise. The house was still. The air smelled like rust. I turned the faucets off, every one of them. The drains made one last deep sigh like something retreating. I stayed another week, waiting for the voice to return. It didn't. The silence should have been comforting, but it wasn't. A few nights before I left for good, I heard a faint knocking in the walls. Not loud, just enough to know it was there. 3 slow taps from inside the plumbing. I didn't check the bathroom, didn't look under the sink, just packed my things and left. Sometimes when it rains now, wherever I am, I still hear that sound in the pipes. Not words anymore, just the rhythm of someone trying to get my attention. And every time I think about that voice, the way it said my name like it knew it better than I did, I still don't know if it was Arthur Hensley or something else that learned how to speak through the water. But I've started to notice something strange when I shower. The drain gurgles just a little before the water goes down. And once or twice, I could have sworn I heard a whisper behind the hiss. Not my name this time, just a question. It was supposed to be an easy job, just cataloging old county roads out past Red Ash Ridge. a stretch of forgotten pavement swallowed by the Appalachians. I was working contract for the Department of Transportation that summer, updating digital maps for a new rural GPS rollout. Most days it was mind-numbing. Check mileage, log coordinates, snap a few photos of mile markers. But that morning, I found a road that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't on any map, digital or paper. Just a gravel offshoot near an abandoned gas station, marked by a rusted green sign that read, "Lonesome Spur Ord." The lettering was barely visible beneath the soot, like it had burned once and no one bothered to replace it. I figured it'd make good data, some forgotten service lane or old mining route, and turned the county truck onto it. The GPS flickered, recalibrating, then locked on with a faint ping. "Proceed north," it said. The first few miles were unremarkable. Dense pine, sagging power lines, the occasional mailbox leaning into the ditch. But the farther I went, the stranger it felt. The air had that heavy, muffled quiet like after a snowstorm, only it was mid-August and humid enough to choke. I rolled the window down for air, and it hit me, the smell of something faintly burnt, like wet ashes and diesel. About 40 minutes in, I passed a signpost, half charred. The letters were gone, but the metal was twisted, melted around the bolts. I made a note and drove on. Another half hour later I saw it again, the same post, same bend in the road, even the same split in the asphalt where roots had pushed through. I slowed the truck, checked the GPS. It still said heading north. But the sun was behind me again, low and orange, like I'd been driving in a circle. I kept going anyway. Maybe I'd just gotten turned around. The mountains had a way of doing that, folding roads into themselves like origami. But when I passed that same burnt signpost a third time, I felt it in my gut. The kind of dread that doesn't announce itself, just builds like a storm front. I stopped, got out, and stood there in the middle of the road. No wind, no birds. Even the cicadas were quiet. I checked my watch. 6:17 p.m. I'd left the station at 2:10. The odometer read the same as it had when I turned off the highway. No mileage gained. The GPS screen flickered again, then froze on a single word. Recalculating. I killed the engine and climbed out. My boots crunched on the gravel. The silence was almost alive, like it was listening. I walked around to the front of the truck, shining my flashlight across the road. That's when I noticed the tire tracks. 2 sets, mine and another, fresher set running parallel before veering off into the woods. The tread pattern was identical. The forest beyond the ditch was dark, but the tracks were clear enough in the mud. I followed them, maybe 50 feet in, before I saw it. Headlights through the trees, dim and yellow, pointed straight toward me. My first thought was another surveyor, maybe one of the night crews. But as I got closer, my stomach dropped. It wasn't another truck. It was mine. Same dents on the fender, same cracked mirror, even the same inspection sticker curling on the windshield. The engine was idling. The door was open. I called out nothing. The forest just swallowed my voice whole. I stepped closer, peered through the window, and felt my skin crawl. The driver's seat was still warm. Then the radio crackled to life. Not the usual static, just a voice, faint, almost a whisper. "You've already been here." I stumbled back, hitting a tree trunk. The voice came again, louder. "You've already been here." I yanked the keys from my pocket and checked. They were still there. My truck was supposed to be 100 feet behind me, engine off. But the one in front of me was running, radio alive, headlights dimming in rhythm with the words. I turned to look behind me, but the road was gone. Nothing but trees. The direction I came from was swallowed by fog thick as milk. I couldn't even see the burnt sign anymore. I don't remember deciding to run, but I did. Crashed through the brush back toward where I thought the road was. Branches tore at my jacket, mud slick underfoot. When I finally broke through the tree line, the truck was waiting there, my original truck, or at least it looked like it. The headlights were off, door shut, engine silent. I climbed in, shaking, and jammed the key into the ignition. The radio clicked on automatically, just static. Then the static shifted, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Between each crackle, a word slipped through. "Turn around." I didn't. I threw the truck in reverse, spun it around, and gunned it back the way I'd come. The forest blurred by. The odometer finally started to move, just barely. I don't know how long I drove. Hours, maybe. The GPS stopped talking altogether. Just blinked red like a dying eye. Every time I passed a bend or a cluster of trees, it felt the same. At one point, I thought I saw headlights behind me, far back, weaving through the fog. For a split second, I thought maybe I wasn't alone. But as they drew closer, I realized they were too high, tilted upward, like someone had lifted the truck and was carrying it through the trees. I didn't look again after that. When the fog finally broke, the road spat me out onto the highway just outside Gray Hollow. The sky was still dusky orange. My dashboard clock read 6:17 p.m., same as before. I pulled into a gas station, stumbled inside, and asked the clerk what day it was. He looked at me funny and said, "Friday." It had been Monday when I left. The next week, I filed my report with the county. They couldn't find any record of a lonesome spur-ard, no burnt signpost, no gravel turnoff, nothing. The GPS logs from my trip were corrupted, just static. A few nights later, I dreamed of driving again. Same road, same mountains, same fog. Only this time, there was another truck ahead of me, just out of reach. Its taillights flickered in rhythm with the radio. I could almost see the driver's face in the mirror before I woke up. When I went out to the driveway that morning, there were 2 sets of tire tracks in the gravel, both leading away from the house. One set older, one fresh. And when I turned on my truck, the GPS screen flickered to life again. It didn't say recalculating this time, it said, "Welcome back."